Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Creator alongside my beautiful co-host Guns. We
Hey,
are Gun Nation. We are Gun Nation United. Today, we're going to bring you a special video. We hadn't done one of these battles in a while, and we thought, why not do two of Shonen's darkest characters? Light Yagami is who I'm going to go over, and Guns, who are you going to go over?
Lelouch v. Britannia, or Lelouch Lamperouge.
So, those are who we're going to be discussing today. So, why not get right up into it? In case you didn't see our last battle video or kind of don't know how this works, basically, I'm going to go over one character, he's going to go over one character, and then we're going to talk about how we think the fight would go. Now, we are going to use the prime of both of these characters, and we're going to get more into that in a minute. For my character, I'm going to use Light. After he killed L during the 3-year reign of Kira, before Nier shows up and ruins everything. A little bit of backstory, in case you don't know who Light Yagami is, which if you don't, you should definitely go watch the show, but he's the main character of the show, Deathnote. After discovering the Deathnote, he decides to use it to rid the world of criminals. His killings are eventually labeled by people of Japan as the work of Kira. The police department, they create a task force, take him down, which is led by this guy named L. And using his big boy brains and the power of the Deathnote, he ends up winning the game of chess against L and taking his reign for 3 years. Now, for those of you that don't know how the Deathnote works, essentially, it's this book. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a notebook of death. So if he writes your name in the book, then you're gonna die. He writes your name, and 45 seconds later you die. He can also specify how you die. So one of the first examples, and one of the most famous examples of this, is there's a scene where he's riding a bus, and the FBI is tailing him, kind of just following him around because he's a person of interest, and they're trying to gather the evidence to get a warrant and stop him and stuff like that. So what he ends up doing is using a Deathnote to have this guy come on this train at an exact time to hijack the train, and then he uses a piece of paper, and the guy touches it, sees the Shinigami standing behind him. Shinigami is the god of death. He is the owner of the Deathnote. They're the ones that create the Deathnotes and stuff like that. And the guy essentially ends up getting freaked out, running off the train, getting hit. The FBI agent was there, so he's got to file a report and stuff like that. And being pop boom, it slows him down a little bit. Now, another fascinating thing about the Deathnote is during the train sequence, right? Light, again, sees the FBI following him and decides to have it out exactly what's going to happen to said FBI agent, and has the FBI agent actually write his friends' names in the book, and his name himself in the book, causing him and his friends to die. And I believe it was 12 agents that were killed during that encounter. Like I said, he has the Deathnote, but he's also very smart. So the series takes place, he's in high school, and he's the smartest kid in his class. He's a genius. He knows about criminal knowledge because his dad is the chief of the police for his town, for his area, and he also is the chief of the task force. So he becomes essentially L's right-hand man, if you want to call it that, because it's a whole weird relationship. But then again, L is a weird character. But because his dad is the chief of police, he also has access to records that a normal teenage boy or young adult, depending on where the series, wouldn't have access to. And then later on in the series, he actually becomes a detective working with the task force So at that point, he doesn't have to sneak around because he has it himself. And during the time where he was the 3-year raid of Kira, he actually picks up the persona of L after he kills him, giving him access to even more stuff, behind the scenes stuff. So, what does L have in the bag? Well, he has the Deathnote, he has his smarts, and he has access to information. And that is a little bit about L and his abilities. Guns?
I'm doing Lelouch from Code Geass. When I think he was 10 years older, young age, somewhere on there, he was the prince of Britannia. Then his mother got killed, and he had asked his father why he hasn't done anything. And then his father gives him an answer, and then Lelouch is banished. He is banished to Japan. And during the war between Britannia and Japan, Lelouch was presumed dead. So he went under a new name, Lelouch Lampert. And during his teenage years in high school, he was a genius as well. He had top marks, everything. And one day, he met a woman, and she gave him what is called Geass. And Geass varies from person to person. And what he got for Geass was the power to control people. In other words, make a certain person or people do his bidding. Whoever looks directly into his eyes. And one time that everyone who has watched the show remembers is when he had told his brother to shoot himself in the head. Or not his brother to shoot himself in the head, but he had told a captain to shoot him and his men to shoot themselves in the head. And they all did it. That's what I have.
You want to let them know when you're gonna, when this fight would take place, which part of Lelouch's life or cycle or whatever you want to, however you want to word it, when this would take place in this made-up universe that we created.
And the phase of his life he would be at in the scenario between Light and Lelouch is when, just before he accidentally put his sister under Geass. And the reason for that is Lelouch Lampert is anonymous. But Lelouch v. Britannia is a prince, and everyone would know it. So we're trying to make it fair.
Light, at this point, so obviously it's like he said, we thought about the scenario, and this is our opinion on how the scenario will go down, okay? You're more than welcome to disagree in the comments, but we're going to set the stage, and we're going to tell you how we believe this fight would go, okay? It's taking place in Japan. Lelouch is still in hiding, and he's building an army. He's building the army of Zero. He's Zero, and he's building his rebellion army. At the same time, Light has his reign of Kira. So his next target is this Zero guy. Because he believes that Zero is evil in this warp combined universe. Okay? Let's forget about Britannia for a second, okay? Because I'm sure Light would take out Britannia and stuff like that. But he's building his army, okay?
It's just Light and Lelouch in this scenario. Britannia has nothing to do with it.
So Lelouch is Zero. Light is Kira. Light's next target is Zero. So he begins to pursue him. He begins to use access to try to find him. Police records, public health records, stuff like that. Going to, trying to get closer and closer to Lelouch.
But at first, the only thing he could find was Zero. because Lelouch's identity was hidden because he wore a mask, and he never ever told his name.
So from this, the cat and mouse game begins, or the game of chess, to be more precise. So obviously, because of Lelouch's rebels and his spies, he obviously picks up when
He would learn that someone is trying to track Zero and find out who he is, but he doesn't know it's Light. Because if Light is smart, he would
keep
erase any
his
trace.
yeah, he would erase any
And
trace and keep himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
they're both trying to hunt each other at this point.
Exactly. And Guns, you want to pick it up from here?
I think Lelouch would set a trap.
We all know how Light is when it comes to traps.
What he would do is Zero would announce publicly where he was going to hit next, thinking that the person who's trying to find him will be there, and he'd be able to use his Geass, or just straight up kill him.
So I think that Light, being cautious, would cautiously take the bait. Now remember, another thing to consider that I wish I would have pointed out, but Guns forgot to mention, and I didn't point out when Guns was going over with that, is you have to remember that Lelouch, or Light, has his Shimigami and his powers and stuff. So we'll say he has the Shimigami, but the main thing about Lelouch is you can't really kill Lelouch, unless, we'll say in this scenario, he can't physically harm him unless he writes his name in the Deathnote.
Lelouch can only use his Geass, and Light can only use his Deathnote.
Lelouch sets this trap. I think Light would cautiously bite it. So
I think he'd go there, but he would hide in the shadows, and of course he'd wear a disguise.
Yeah, I think he'd mainly use his Shimigami.
Or he could, depending on the location, tap into the surveillance cameras.
Yeah.
And see if there was actually a deal or something going on there.
So I think he would. I think there's a couple possibilities. I think he would end up going there, but I think there would be a couple possibilities. So I think he would either show up there and in disguise, just as a normal person, like let's say if it was a shopping mall, right? He would show up at the shopping mall, pretend in the shop, and then he would have Shimigami kind of survey the place, kind of like he did with the cameras,
Yeah. Because Lelouch or any of his friends can't see him because they never touched the Deathnote.
Exactly. So I think that's possibility number one. Possibility number two is that he uses the Deathnote to cause a scene there. But regardless, I think he'd be there, and he would either use the Shimigami to look around for any type of clues, or cause a scene just to see what would happen. That's what Light does. Guns, Lelouch in response. Based on those two options.
Lelouch would use the method he used to get all the Japanese off of Japan, all the quote unquote rebels off of Japan and move them to China. Which was they got all the people together so they could be exiled, but Zero would have to die. What he did was they got everybody there. They all threw smoke, and when the smoke went away, everyone was Zero.
Okay, so let's say, make it simple without overcomplicating. Yeah, so let's just say, without overcomplicating it, Lelouch sets a trap. Light, based on patterns, shows up at a time he thinks it's going to happen, kind of scouts out the place, waits for Zero to show up, or, waits for some action to happen, and then causes a scene, having massive people kill themselves, or whatever the case is, right?
Yeah.
Just to kind of see how Lelouch would respond, because I think that's pretty fair to say. Light would probably do something like that, right?
Yeah.
Just to kind of bait him out. And then Lelouch shows up with all these people. So now we're at the now we're at this point where there's like 100 zeros, right?
I wouldn't say 100 zeros, but Zero brought his main crew with him, and the quote unquote gangsters or politicians, corrupt politicians, whatever he was going to interrupt, was part of his crew too. So they threw smoke down, and all of a sudden, all those zeros show up. So he doesn't know who's the real Zero.
Yeah.
But then Lelouch can see him, or at least not see him, but he knows something's going on because all of his crew's names are kept secret too, or at least until they get caught by the government. I would think after that happens, after all the zeros show up, Light would hightail it because one, he doesn't know who any of the people are.
Yeah.
Like, he knows their face, he can look them up later and kill them later. He doesn't know who any of the people are. He still doesn't know the identity of Zero. I think the Light would cut his losses and leave.
Yeah, for now. But he did get to see their faces, correct?
Yeah, the quote unquote dealers. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll say. So I think that's a good possibility. I think he would see their faces. I think he would hightail it and leave. Remember the faces. Be able to look it up later. But
Yeah.
that means at this point, Lelouch knows who Light is, or at least saw Light and saw him being suspicious, hightailing it out of there. So while Light is hightailing it and planning to go look up all these people, to try to kill them and get some info from them, and stuff like that, to come off a plan on what to do, what do you think Lelouch's response is?
I would think if Lelouch saw him, he'd doing the same thing, except he knows the guy. He knows his guy, so he'd get his school info, this and that and the other. Would it be using his Geass if Lelouch uses his Geass on his dad, on Light's dad, and has Light's dad kill Light?
I think that's a fair statement.
Because I think that would happen.
You know what? No, because in this timeline, Light's dad is already dead, so that couldn't happen.
Okay. What about like any of his family members?
Well, you have like his sister, you have his mom, you have that other detective with him, and then you have Misa.
Well, it would have to be someone who would let his guard down around. So like someone from his family, like his sister or his mom. And then he can use Geass on them, like they could stab him or whatever. The Lelouch could give him a gun and tell him to kill Light.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. And to sum it up, I know we kind of been stumbling through our words and stuff like that. If you don't have a beer, make sure you grab one. But
yep,
I think I think that's about right. We did talk about this before we recorded. And in essence, just to break it down, I think they'd both be hunting after each other. I think Lelouch would. I agree 100%. I think that Lelouch would set a trap. I think Light would take it. I think Light would be overwhelmed by the numbers. He would hightail it, try to remember the faces, but obviously Lelouch at that point, if he doesn't see him, one of his posse's gonna see, hey, this guy's running away.
He has Lelouch has his group post hidden at all the entrances and exits and all that.
Yeah.
So
he sees this guy running, realizes, hey, finds out who he is, like, hey, this is like Yagami, starts looking into things, because now they have a name. So now they do their research, right? Now they say, okay, this is like Yagami, okay, this L guy was killed, this guy's now pretending to be L, his dad was killed, everybody around him seems to die, kind of all this, everything is revolving around this guy. I mean,
basically,
I think
Lelouch, after he does his research, he would see the same thing L saw, or at least start to see what L saw. in
Yeah.
light. Or around
And then
light.
Yeah, because even at that point, even if Light, gets to pick off a couple of the... Because all it's going to do is confirm, if anything, if Light
Confirm his
pits
identity.
off... Yeah, if Light pits off some of his members.
Yeah.
Right? Which I don't think Light is stupid enough to do that, but at that point, he's already doomed.
He figured might as well take as many as out as I can.
And at that point, Lelouch comes in, Geass is Light, Geass is his sister to kill him, Geass is his mom. Don't matter, at the end of the day, Light's going down.
Yeah.
Because it's just a numbers game. And somebody would see Light running, and even if Light saw them and figured out, okay, these guys are working with him, he never saw Lelouch's face. I think that's how it'd be. Guns?
I agree.
Any final words?
No.
Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, women, gentlewomen, weebs and weeblets, this has been Gun Nation United. Truly grateful that you guys watched the video. If you guys enjoyed it, please like, comment, subscribe. Let us know who you want to see up against each other next, or another weapons video, or whatever you want to see. Let us know down below. Other than that, you guys remember the most important rule, right? You learned about this in kindergarten, okay? It's pretty much the secret of life. All you guys have to do is keep in mind and remember, keep your ammo hot and your beer ice cold. And we'll see you next time.